Have you ever felt yourself shutting down emotionally, withdrawing, going numb, or even feeling like you disappear in your relationship? Well, you're not alone. In this video, we're going to talk about that particular protective strategy, where it comes from, how it developed, but most importantly, we're going to talk about some strategies to try to broaden that so that you can use that strategy with more flexibility so that you have more control over when and where you feel like you need to emotionally shut down. My name is Tom Philp, and I'm the founder of Trauma-Free Relationship. I've been helping adults for years who struggle with relational trauma regain more trust in themselves and others so that they can experience a safe and secure relationship. Okay, as I mentioned previously, this idea of shutting down is actually a way your nervous system has learned to protect you. It's a protective strategy, and it's really important. And we don't want to just banish or try to get rid of this strategy. What we want to do is try to create more flexibility with it. First, let's talk about how this might have developed. This protective strategy is usually most associated with the more avoidant style of attachment. So when you sense some kind of emotional threat, or when you sense some kind of danger that may be getting close to your trauma wound, your body steps in and it knows what to do. It knows this pattern and it uses this strategy in order to keep you safe. It sort of jumps up and says, "Oh, I'll take it from here. Don't worry, I've got this. I know exactly what to do." And even if you don't want it to, it begins to shut down. It begins to disconnect you emotionally, or it makes you want to get up and actually leave in order to avoid any kind of conflict. As I said, this strategy is important. We don't want to wish it away. What we want to do is create more flexibility with it so that we have more control over when we want to use it and when we don't. We have more recognition over being able to see it and not just have it completely control us at times when we don't want it to. This particular strategy usually is born out of rejection or abandonment or a series of experiences where you tried to show up and nobody was there to be able to respond to you. And when that happened, your body learned there's no point in trying to express myself and trying to be vulnerable. There's no point in trying to show up emotionally upset or hurt or get any kind of validation it might need, because there's nobody there to receive that on the other end. And as a result, this part of you was created. It was created to protect you. And as I've said many times on this channel, we are made for connection and we are also made for protection. And so this part was created in order to protect you from feeling so abandoned or so rejected, or so emotionally having an unavailable person there to be able to sit with you in those feelings. And so what does that look like in our relationships? It looks like you scanning the environment, trying to detect, is there any moment in which I might be criticized, in which there might be some kind of conflict, in which I might be feeling overwhelmed emotionally? And when those triggers start to occur, your body immediately goes into this shutdown type of strategy. And so it can do it a couple of different ways. As I said, it might disconnect you from your emotions, or it might overwhelm you with your emotions so that you are not even sure of what you feel. You can't get clear about that. Or it might cause you to want to just extract yourself from the situation completely. Maybe you just get up and you leave the room and go somewhere else. Nonetheless, this strategy was hard fought and hard won because it was born from some traumatic experiences, and this is the only way you could adapt and stay safe at the time. But now you're probably realizing that it's not always adaptive anymore, that it's actually causing you problems in your current relationship. Okay, now that we've described a little bit about what it's like, how you may experience that in yourself and in your relationships, let's talk about what can we do to try to create more flexibility in this particular protective strategy. One of the first things we need to do is we need to be able to recognize the internal landscape and what begins to happen when you start to shut down. And so being able to understand, oh, I feel myself going numb, or oh, I feel myself getting overwhelmed or confused about what I'm actually feeling. When that occurs, what you need to do is you need to be able to try to ground yourself. So one of the techniques I really like is the breathing technique of 4, 4, and 6. So you inhale for 4 seconds, or for the count of 4, you hold it for 4 seconds, and then you exhale for 4 seconds. So I'm going to do this just as a demonstration. So to inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4, and then exhale for 6. And when I do that, I can just immediately feel my body relaxing. I can feel myself even starting to slow down. I know sometimes I get worked up because I love talking about all this stuff. I'm really passionate about it, and I maybe even talk too fast sometimes. But man, I can just feel myself slowing down. So if you rewind that and you do that back with me, see if you just notice. See if you notice a shift in your own body. See if you notice a way that you're starting to feel a little more grounded. Part of what that does is when we inhale, it turns on our parasympathetic nervous system. And when we exhale, it turns on our sympathetic nervous system. So you're working both of your nervous systems in and out, and it causes you to be able to just relax. It's a really good grounding technique. Another one I like is just see if you can't turn your attention to your feet if they're resting on the floor, your hand if it's on your lap. Start rubbing your leg for a moment. Turn your attention to your leg. Do you have shorts on? Can you feel your skin? Can you feel it starting to sort of get kind of warm as you're rubbing it back and forth? Or do you notice the texture of the particular pants that you're wearing? Any type of grounding technique can take you out of this strategy of shutting down, and it can ground you a little bit more. And it's really important to just first notice it and then try to counteract it a little bit and begin to be able to be a little more grounded in yourself in order to try to stay more present in the conversation with your partner. Another one that I think is really important is simply being able to name the experience, to recognize it and name what is happening when it's happening. And you can say this to yourself, you could say it to your partner if you happen to be with them or if you're in some kind of discussion with them. But just being able to say, I feel myself starting to shut down. Sometimes the naming of that experience alone is enough to sort of jolt your system and to jolt that protective strategy, and it goes, oh, you're actually seeing what I'm doing here? Wow, I'm not used to you recognizing this. And so naming that experience can be really empowering for you in the moment, because now you're drawing attention to what's happening internally inside of you, and now you've got more power over the control you have of whether you want to continue to shut down or whether you want to try to fight against it, or maybe even just ask that protective part of you, hey, I've got this. I'm okay right now. Can you just step aside? I'm going to be all right. You can trust me, but would you mind just stepping aside and not shutting down right now? Because I really need to be able to stay connected to my partner in this moment. So being able to name the experience is really important. Being able to tell your partner that what's happening to you in that moment can be very empowering as well. Hey, I feel myself starting to shut down. Do you mind if I just kind of stand up for a minute? It helps me to move around a little bit so I don't shut down as much. What you're saying is important, and I want to stay engaged in this conversation, but I don't want to go back into shutting down and going back into a freeze state where I just need to ultimately leave the room. Do you mind if I just get up and maybe pace a little bit while you're talking or kind of move around? It helps me to stay more engaged. Your partner would probably freak out if you were able to say that to them, because for the first time they would actually be able to hear what's going on inside of you instead of just seeing the stone wall that gets thrown up when they're trying to talk to you. So being able to name the experience to yourself or being able to communicate what's happening inside of you to your partner can be really important strategies to create more flexibility in this particular coping style or this particular nervous system strategy as we've talked about. Okay, one final tip and technique I want to give you, and this is something you can actually practice a little bit each day. Reflect back on your day, either at the end, maybe in the middle if you want to, whenever it feels appropriate, and ask yourself, were there any times where I started to shut down emotionally? Were there any times where I felt numb or like I was disappearing? Were there any times where I felt overwhelmed or confused or couldn't make sense of my feelings? And then ask yourself, what happened right before that? What was the trigger that might have caused that? Now remember, and I think I've talked about this on this channel before, it's important to understand that there are external triggers and there are internal triggers. So it doesn't have to be something that happened outside of you. Say your boss walked in and threw the report on your desk or something and said, you're going to need to redo this, the specs have been changed, or whatever it is, or a angry look from your partner, something that might have triggered you externally. That can certainly happen. But internal triggers can come up as well. And so we can have a feeling or a sensation or a thought that can trigger us internally. But this is a great exercise that you can do on a daily basis to begin to recognize, okay, I know my strategy is to shut down. I've got to get better at learning what triggers that. So you can reflect each day as you go along at various points. What happened right before I began to shut down? And this will really help you connect those dots to your internal landscape so that you get much better at being able to recognize when you're shutting down so that you then can have more control and be able to use some of these tools and techniques we've talked about today to be able to stay grounded or to name the experience so that you can create more flexibility in your strategy or your style of coping when there's disconnection or when there's potential conflict or potential emotional danger. Okay, the real goal of learning how to have more flexibility is twofold. One, it allows you to stay more emotionally engaged with your partner. And that's going to be crucial for you to be able to work through issues and talk through things with your partner. And your partner is probably going to love that you're working on this. Because my guess is if this is your particular style of coping, your particular strategy, then they've experienced this repeatedly in their relationship with you. And so if they're able to see you start to have more flexibility over this, they're going to feel closer and more connected to you. And they're going to get signals from you that you're more interested in their feelings, in their thoughts, and how they show up in the relationship as well. The second way that this is so important is that it helps you be able to regain trust in yourself, that you have more autonomy and more control over your emotional life when you start to protect yourself, to have that ability to say, you know what, I've got this right now, I need you to step aside. Or to say, you know what, I really do feel in danger. This is appropriate right now. This situation's getting out of hand. I do need to extricate myself. I do need to leave the situation or shut down emotionally or turn off. This is appropriate right now. And I will look back and review this later if I could have done something different. But in this moment, it really feels like a threat. Having that sense of trust in yourself, that you know the emotional landscape, you know the triggers, you know the coping strategies, you know the wounds it's trying to protect, gives you much more flexibility in how you show up in your relationships and gives you more power so that you don't find yourself shutting down emotionally so that it's just so automatic. You've actually got more control over it. Hey, thank you so much for watching. My name is Tom Philp, and I'm here to remind you to stay grounded, clear, and connected.